All right, welcome everyone. We'll just give folks another 60 seconds or so here to sign on, and then we'll get started. Thanks for joining us this evening. Just a couple quick reminders to stay muted if you're not asking a question towards the end of our session. And the chat box is available to type in questions once we get there, but we're asking that you leave those side conversations to a minimum. And thanks for joining us. We're happy you're here. All right. Welcome everyone and happy Thursday evening. We are excited to be here this evening with the project team from the City of Bozeman and our consultant team to share with you our latest progress on the Unified Development Code update that the city is undertaking. And tonight's Code Connect is focused on sustainability. So these Code Connect webinars are happening throughout the duration of the project and are your opportunity to get up to speed on the latest topics that we're tackling with this project, and then to ask lots of questions and provide input to the project team at the end of the meeting. And these sessions are being recorded. So if you have colleagues or friends or neighbors who aren't able to join us this evening, this recording will go up after the meeting on that Engage Bozeman site. So that project page URL is engage.bozeman.net/UDC. And you can find all the recordings to these Code Connect sessions and City Commission meetings, and then other opportunities to engage there as well. So with that, just a little bit of logistics here to kick us off. I'll just start us off here with a really brief introduction and then turn it over to the project team, and they'll give that overview of where we've been so far, especially focused on the sustainability topic. And then at the end, we're gonna have plenty of time for Q&A from you all, and we ask that you hold your questions to the end. And I'll go over how we will coordinate that Q&A once the presentations are wrapped up. So again, this meeting is being recorded and will be posted publicly after the meeting. And then again, just keep those side conversations in the chat box to a minimum and stay muted, and we'll hear from you at the end of the session. All right, so to just let everyone know who is in the room with us this evening, my name is Danny Hess, and I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for the City of Bozeman. And I am joined by my colleagues at the city tonight. Natalie Meyer is the Sustainability Program Manager. And I think Chris Saunders is also joining us from the Planning Division. And then we have the Code Studio team, Colin and Ryan.
Hello.
And then Jen and Sophie are also joining us from Logan Simpson, who are sustainability experts on the project. And I think, oh yeah, cool. So yeah, at the end of the meeting, we'll receive those questions in the order that they come in. So there's two ways that you can get in line for questions. One is to raise your hand. And so if you look down here in the lower left-hand corner, there's just a little box that shows you how you can do that. If you move your cursor over the bottom of your screen, that reactions button with the little smiley face, you can click that, and then that raise hand bar will raise your hand, and then we'll be able to call you out in line in that participants bar. So when your name is called, if you've got your hand raised, just go ahead and come off mute and ask your question and lower your hand. The second way to ask a question is to type it into the chat box. And again, I'll have my eye on that chat box and call your name, or I'll read out your question as it is in the chat box, and we'll go from there. And we know we've got a handful of folks on the call with us this evening, and we just want to make sure that we're giving everyone a fair chance to ask their questions. So please do chime in, but know that we expect just one question at a time from folks. And then if you've got more, we'll come back to you after everyone has had a chance to have their question answered. Awesome. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to the Code Studio team.
Thanks, Danny. Could you bump the slide up, please, Jen? Thanks. My name is Colin Scott. I'm with Code Studio. Code Studio is, I guess, responsible for leading this effort. We have some help, some other folks. Ryan from our office, he's going to jump in here in a minute and give the bulk of the presentation for Code Studio, and then Jen from Logan Simpson is going to talk to you about sustainability. So just the primary goal of this effort is to update the existing UDC with the idea that we'd be kind of implementing some of the city's currently adopted plans, like including the new community plan. We're trying to overall improve the overall usability of the UDC. We want to modernize it, make it more user-friendly, add graphics, and just make it overall a easier and better document to use. And then try to make it more predictable, try to get better outcomes with the document, especially in terms of what it's producing in terms of the built environment. So that's just a brief overview of the project. I'm going to hand it over to Ryan, who's going to just talk you through a little bit about the project team and talk a little bit about the timeline associated with the project.
Absolutely. Thanks, Colin. So as Colin said, we're with Code Studio, the project lead. We're a zoning and urban design consulting firm, primarily based in Austin, with employees sort of scattered about different parts of the country. As part of our overall project team, we have Logan Simpson and Jen Gardner and Sophie Frankenberg are here on the call, as well as others who have been working with them on this effort, primarily on sustainability related topics. On the engagement side of things, we are sort of pursuing a really robust public outreach effort in conjunction with this project. And that's being spearheaded by Interborough partners out of Brooklyn, who do sort of specialize in really creative, interesting ways to do public outreach for planning projects. So a little look at the timeline for the overall UDC update. We started this project kind of late summer of this year, kicked off with some internal research and discussions and sort of looking at staff identified issues internally. And since then, we've moved sort of into the more code drafting and engagement phase of things, which is where we are currently, the bulk of the project. We've completed 3 work sessions with the City Commission, one in September, October, and November. We have 3 more scheduled in the spring as well. So we're sort of halfway through that formal City Commission process where we go and receive guidance on specific topics. Beginning next summer, we'll have our final draft or our public review draft of the updated code out for public review and to kick off the adoption process later into 2023. Danny already mentioned it once, but we'll mention it several times during this session. Any updates about the project, information, ways to get involved are all posted on the project page on Engage Bozeman. It's engage.bozeman.net/UDC. It's updated regularly. I'd say probably several times a week on average. So check back often for updates. We'll post recordings of meetings like this, presentations, really any outreach efforts we do in person or online will be updated and funneled through the website as we progress through the project. You can also sign up for a newsletter on that page. And so finally, just a quick update on some of those outreach activities that Interborough is leading. Here's a picture of one of their pop-up engagement stations they've built in conjunction with several students from MSU's Community Design Center. They've done some pop-up events at the Winter Farmers Market, and they actually joined an MSU class, I believe, on public engagement or public outreach earlier this week. We'll also be stationed at the Christmas stroll right on Main Street this weekend. We'll go back to the Winter Farmers Market in the near future. once the weather starts to improve in the spring, I'm sure you'll see more on that list as well. But finally, to touch on those work sessions that I mentioned before, we've completed 3 so far. We spoke to City Commission about the format and layout of the overall document, sort of our approach to consolidating and rethinking and looking at the existing zoning districts, and most recently led by Logan Simpson, sustainability, which you'll hear about today. In the spring, we have 3 more work sessions scheduled. One got cut off of this slide, my apologies. And those will focus on issues related to parks and parkland, parking requirements that are within the code and commercial zoning districts specifically. And then the third will look at transportation related issues in the code, and that'll be on March 21st. And I believe from there, I will hand it off to Jen to talk about sustainability.
Great, thanks, Ryan. So I'm going to run through a few slides here. These are primarily or mostly the same slides that we had at the meeting on the 15th that we presented to the City Commission. So made a few adjustments following that meeting, but so for those of you that might have been tuned into that meeting, these will look familiar. So what is sustainability in the context of the Unified Development Code? As we all know, sustainability is a very broad term, but within the confines of the UDC, we're looking at, low impact development, waterwise landscapes, wildland urban interface, bicycle infrastructure, solar infrastructure, recycling and composting, electric vehicle charging, and urban agriculture. Those last 2 items are the 2 that we're going to focus on a little bit more this evening. And you always ask yourself, why do we need to include these elements into the Unified Development Code? And the policy has been set and the vision has been set previously by the community plan and the climate plan. The community plan encourages more urban agriculture and encourages integration of climate change into the development standards. So we're taking some guidance from the community plan on those topics. And then the climate plan itself talks about adopting solar ready code, supporting community electric vehicles, looking at enhancing compact and sustainable development and supporting local food production. So the other component of sustainability that often comes up is the cost. So it sometimes seems like a costly adventure to integrate sustainable practices into a development, but with the status quo cost rising and the cost of infrastructure falling, it's actually a great time to be implementing sustainability. Additionally, with climate change, we have a lot of our weather events are increasing. So flood, wildfire, drought, extreme temperature are on the rise, and it costs a lot more to clean up after the fact than it does to put in place provisions on the front end. So there are a number of sustainability efforts currently underway with the City of Bozeman. There's a low impact design is already encouraged within the city within stormwater management. The stormwater management manual and design standards are currently being updated to further explain how low impact design can be incorporated. There's new landscaping and water conservation regulations underway. The State Department is looking at wildland urban interface standards to help communities help provide guidance to communities on wildland urban interface regulations. So that will be up and coming. And the Sustainability Division is looking into solar ready regulations. So you saw that as an action item in the climate plan, and that is underway. There's already composting and recycling programs, and there's a Gallatin County Sensitive Lands Protection Plan underway as well. I'm going to run through a few slides on some of the topics from that first slide, what some of these different elements are. So low impact design is stormwater management by way of bioswales, pervious pavement, just way to provide porosity to the landscape or to the development to allow water to infiltrate into the ground. Like I said, it's already encouraged, and that stormwater management manual is underway to continue to guide low impact development. With water-wise landscape standards, you want to look at not only water plants that use less water and ways to integrate them into the landscape, but also looking at soil volume requirements. So with your street trees, providing a certain volume of soil for those trees to live in to help them survive the urban environment. The wildland-urban interface is always an important factor in communities such as Bozeman. You're in a high wildfire risk area. And some of the standards that can be implemented with regards to wildland-urban interface are different access standards to encourage emergency access, defensible space around structures to provide easier access and to reduce the fuels around a building, and vegetation management that goes hand in hand with defensible space. Bike infrastructure, we all know about bike racks, but bike racks are evolving. There's long-term and short-term bike parking. A lot of communities are including long-term covered or indoor bike parking for long-term for transit stops or for office buildings, so on. And then also electric bikes are becoming a huge fad, and providing electric bicycle charging stations is coming on board in a lot of codes. Solar infrastructure, there's a lot of different facets to solar infrastructure. One can be requiring certain building orientation to take advantage of solar gain. There can be building code standards to ensure that the roof structure has the capacity to hold the roof panels. And this, like we said before, the Sustainability Division is starting to look into some of these solar ready regulations. Recycling and composting, in addition to just offering the programs, you can consider shared space standards for, say, multifamily type housing, and then considering wildlife conflicts. So I'm going to go into a little more detail on electric vehicle charging and urban agriculture. Electric vehicle charging is currently allowed, it's not required. And there are about 456 registered electric vehicles in Gallatin County. So there's a need for this. There are studies being underway currently that are starting to look at locations of electric vehicle charging stations across the state, and how often or how regular they might need to be placed to accommodate the need. And 92% of electric vehicle charging does occur in the home. So really looking at more of your residential infrastructure is a key component. And Montana DEQ does offer EV charging infrastructure funding. So when electric vehicle charging is required on a project, there is funding available to help subsidize that. Electric vehicle charging kind of falls into three different categories. You have EV capable, where you've laid the conduit and have plates in the ground so you can access that conduit, but none of the electricity is set in place yet. EV ready would be where you do have that electricity in place. EV ready is what a lot of single family homes see, where you have the plug on the wall. There's not any other major infrastructure. And then EV installed is your more of your commercial parking lot electric vehicle charging stations that you see. And those come in a variety of levels as well. Your level 1 is typically like what you see in your single family home. And then your level 2 and the fast chargers are the two that you see more often in parking lots, commercial type applications. And, everyone always asks about the cost of EV charging stations. It's much cheaper to install the infrastructure during construction, whether that be running the electricity or at least running the conduit to allow for the electricity in the future. As we all know, it's much cheaper to install at the time of construction rather than having to go in and tear up the concrete and patch in the new infrastructure. I believe we pulled some stats, and I think it's somewhere on the order of 8 to 10 times more expensive to install after the fact. So urban agriculture, it is already allowed in several zone districts. We are focusing on plants, not animals, with regards to urban agriculture with this effort, and just really building on the agricultural history of Bozeman. providing an opportunity for more pervious space as well. And what that can look like in different zone districts, we've got kind of a commercial scale urban agriculture, could be vertical farming, aeroponic, hydroponic type growing. We understand in the Bozeman climate, it's a very short growing season, and oftentimes people are growing indoors. Potential zone districts for a commercial scale urban agriculture is more your manufacturing and industrial zone districts, which are indicated in the purple on the zoning map over to the left. Community scale urban agriculture is looking at more those central business districts and community districts, mixed use districts, looking at accessory greenhouses. Maybe it's a restaurant with a greenhouse on top. Maybe it's a vertical garden on the side of a building, and looking at artisan manufacturing models. And then a neighborhood scale urban agriculture, you're looking at more your community gardens and farm stands. And this is could be allowed in all residential districts and support some home-based businesses. So these are some discussion items that we brought to the City Commission. I just wanted to highlight them on this slide and kind of highlight the feedback we did receive from that commission meeting. So electric vehicle charging, we were asking what level of implementation is appropriate for multi-household development. So that's kind of your apartment building type structures. And we had given options of low, medium, and high. They were pretty involved or pretty interested in the high category, ensuring that at least EV readiness was available. So the infrastructure was in place to allow for the EV installation at a later date. We asked about EV chargers for commercial parking lots, and it was a similar response. They felt it was important to have them be EV capable. And there were some concerns about lighting, making sure that, you know, those EV charging stations sometimes emit a little bit of a light. So making sure that we're dark sky compliant with any lighting of those, EV charging stations, and then screening of the mechanical equipment. There's, especially with the fast chargers, there's additional transformers and electrical equipment involved. So those were some of the concerns that they had, or some thoughts that were brought up at the City Commission meeting. With regards to urban agriculture, we asked if they supported on-site sale of produce in neighborhoods, and the answer was yes, but maybe thinking about some standards specifically to where they might be located. So if it's a community garden, having a farm stand within that community garden and not necessarily out on the sidewalk, impeding the flow of traffic. And then we asked if they supported expanded allowance of agriculture into more commercial and industrial districts, and they said yes. There was not much discussion on that topic. And then, do we need to allow a height encroachment for functional on-site food production? And again, they said yes. And again, with the height encroachment, that is just to allow those greenhouses on top of a roof. Say the building's already maxed out at the max height, allowing for a little additional height for a structure to grow vegetables in. I'm going to kick it back to Colin to wrap this up, and then we'll go to questions.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks for that overview. So we're just going to open up this to Q&A in a second, but I just want to encourage people to reach out to their friends and their neighbors, tell them about this project, try to get as many people involved in this project as we can. Again, making a plug for the website, engage.bozeman.net/UDC. That is going to be our primary outreach tool for this effort. So please stay tuned to that website early and often. Future City Commission work sessions are coming up. So parks, right? Implementing the parks plan that's going through the process right now. February 28th, we're going to be talking to the City Commission about parking. So that will be a really fun conversation. So please check that one out. And then in late March, we're going to be talking to the City Commission about transportation issues as they relate to the UDC. So yeah, stay tuned for future Code Connect webinars. We haven't got any scheduled yet. We did have one scheduled, I believe it was February 1st, but we had to move that around to due to some moving some dates moving around in terms of parking. So stay tuned for those. Check the website. That will be happening early next year. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to just hand it back to Danny, and she's going to just help facilitate the conversation for us. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Colin. One more update as far as engagement goes. We are going to be uploading this mobile engagement station activity into a digital format that will be hosted on that Engage Bozeman site. So that will be coming up probably next week. I'll be sending out a newsletter on the Engage Bozeman platform. So make sure you're signed up for those newsletters, and then check back next week, and there'll be an opportunity for you to participate in that engagement activity in a digital format if you haven't run into us out and about in the community. Okay, so send your questions in via chat or raise that hand, and we can get some conversation going here. Don't be shy. I'm seeing a lot of familiar names in the participants panel here, and I know that you've got thoughts to share, so chime in. Hey, Marcia, go ahead and come off mute and ask your question.
Hi, Danny. I was waiting for others first. How are you?
Doing good.
Good. Thanks
Yeah.
for that nice presentation. I was at the beginning of that city commission meeting for other things, but wasn't able to stay, and I never got a chance to look at it. But I do have a couple things. One, the city website changed recently, and it used to be when you went to bozeman.net, you'd see Engage Bozeman right at the top, and it stayed there in one place. And now it's flipping through on the side briefly, so like all these projects. And I was just wondering if someone who's in the know with that, like I found it, I was like, where is it? Where did it go? How can I tell people how to get there? And so now you have to click on our city, and there's projects, and then Engage Bozeman is on the next column over. And I just wondered if it isn't a project. Is this Engage Bozeman? I mean, is this Code Connect thing a project that could be listed under the city projects? Just something to think about, because now that Engage Bozeman is just a little slightly harder to find, I just wonder if we're going to lose a few people, but in the learning process. That was one thing. And then I had just a couple thoughts. Like I think the EV stations are great. You know, I have a hybrid, but 450 vehicles out of over 100,000 people, I don't know if that is a huge need. And so I was kind of surprised. I don't know what the percentage is of that, like how many people out of our county actually have one, but it seems like that's a really small need right now, so that it could maybe go into a slightly less priority category. But just kind of a thought about that. 400, like I said, I didn't do the math, 450 cars out of however many people we have in Gallatin County just does seem a little small. Yet I do agree that we need them, but just don't want you guys to spend a lot of time on something that few people have. That's one thought. And then I'd love to see something about bus stops in the UDC. So new developments allowing space for bus stops. Because I think if it's an afterthought, it's sometimes hard to fit those places in for a bus to pull over and people to be waiting. And also, I'll just skip to my last thing. Oh, well, two things. One is bikes. I love biking around Bozeman in the summer and used to in the winter, but I no longer bike in the winter. And I just think we need to continue to think about bikes, but also remember that we've got winter for 5 months a year sometimes. And there's like during the winter, I think half of our population will not be biking, you know, the old and the very young. And so I think like it's an important thing too, but what I hear so much about this multimodality, but we're just not, you know, a warm enough climate yet to be, you know, have the majority of people biking year round. So I just I just hope everybody's keeping that in mind. And my last thing was, I don't know if you guys can work some magic, but Colin, it's Colin, right? And Ryan?
Yep, it
Yep.
is.
you said something that really caught my attention that I don't know if the city really heard, and that was at the previous meeting, and it was about the sprawling, how we're getting all these commercial neighborhoods in town, and that was part of this ideal for the community plan. But as you pointed out to the city commission, it's not the most fiscally sustainable and supportable. And I just wonder, like, I drive now to more places than I ever have before because of all of our commercial neighborhoods being set up. I'll have a skin doctor in one place, a different doctor in another place. And I find I can only imagine that other people are doing the same. So our focus, the city's focus on getting neighborhoods with commercial zones so it's walkable, I think is backfiring, and it's actually become more driving for me personally when the middle schools move to the outsides of the outer edges of town and all these different zones. So I'm thinking about all these car trips that are happening and the amount of time people spend, sitting and idling in their cars or moving from one place to another. And I would love Code Connect to just say that again somehow, or if there's a magical way to bring that into the UDC about getting those commercial zones closer to historic downtown, or it's preventing some of the sprawl that we have. And I've taken up a lot of time and I don't want to do that. I want to give someone else a chance to ask a question. So those are my main thoughts.
Thanks, Marcia. Yeah, you mentioned a lot of sort of overlapping themes that I think, are important to bring up in both sustainability conversations and in the transportation one. So stay tuned, and thanks for your input. Emily?
Hi, everybody. Yeah, so a little bit of overlap here. I think like yes to electronic vehicles and also yes to walkability. I realize that the parking discussion isn't till the next one, but I was really surprised once, like the word, and I didn't see walkability once. And we know that that's like a huge alternative to vehicles. The EV infrastructure goes, we want to make sure that doesn't happen at the expense of focusing on walkability, and hopefully those things aren't in conflict with one another, that especially when we're talking about the code, where it's like if we're going to relax things like parking requirements, then it seems like it could be now, but you have to have EV charging at your parking. It's like, okay, so because an EV is still a car. And then a little bit about like maybe some unintended consequences in highlighting from a code standpoint, the importance of transition zones. I had looked into doing solar on my home, and I then learned about what is
Emily, you're breaking up a little bit.
In the zoning district adjacent to mine, so right across the street from me, and knowing that. Oh,
Emily, unfortunately, you're breaking up a little bit.
So how about now?
Yeah, it's just a little.
I'm going to go ahead and type it in the box.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that. Thank you so much. Yeah, and if we circle back to something else you want to chime in on, maybe we'll have better luck later on, but please do add it to the chat. All right, I see Christopher's hand up and then Kathy. So take it away, Christopher.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to ask when and how will water protection, and wetland mitigation be addressed in this process, both for jurisdictional and non-jurisdictional wetlands? I see that, in one of those slides you had water-wise landscaping and wildlife urban interface. And of course, you're looking over things. Water's best where it's already going and where it naturally wants to. So is there any way to encourage the preservation of those low areas that would be natural catchments on site, that those are kind of semi-sacred. So water will go where it should go, and it's kind of like not having to build infrastructure at that point. So it should be, I would think, there's a way to make it cost effective or efficient at the beginning. And then, of course, with the situation, with impacts to small wetlands and what have you, how we make it so that we can keep our wetland functions, water retention right in the local area. As most of you probably know, there's currently no wetland bank for mitigating if a wetland is impacted within the city limits. With Sacagawea Audubon, we are in the process of establishing one. And, that's great on one hand, but if there's no additional incentive for people, other than just let's all be happy and do this type of thing, if it's cheaper by a great deal to go, 90 miles away or 100 miles away, that's probably what will be done. So there's got to be some value shown in keeping water, the importance of keeping those wetland functions right here, because as we know, water is going to be the thing in the West. It already really is. So in what way are those items being addressed? I think water-wise landscaping is great. I've spent some time in Portland, and it seems to me maybe like they are leading the way on some of these, curb cuts and the water infiltration right along the street in what would have been a tree lawn. And that's great. I don't know, though, maybe someone's done studies. I can see where that would work a lot easier in the Portland area, where you have a lot less freezing than it will in Bozeman, Montana. There might be a way to do it, but I can see that there is a bigger factor there that might be limiting it with the extensive freezing and deep freezing that we get in Bozeman, as opposed to another area. So just wondering how that and how deeply that's all being looked at. And I guess that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Christopher. Yeah, maybe I'll turn that over to Jen first, and then it looks like Colin is raring to chime in too.
Yeah.
Jen, take it away.
Yeah, so those are great questions. I will say, looking at preservation of areas, looking at the natural catchments, that's something we can look into. I mean, it sometimes is up to the site and how it's being developed, but we can kind of look at that. The wetland banks are definitely becoming a more popular tool to be used. So that's something we could look at as well. I don't know that it's come up in conversation yet, so I'm glad you brought that one up. And the other one is the low impact development. I'm actually based in Colorado, and we don't get as much freeze as you guys do. We're just not quite as cold as you, and but our soils are also very clay. So we do have a little bit of difficulty with bioswales and rain gardens. And what we have to do is put in a little extra infrastructure to provide some additional drainage to get that water down quicker. And then oftentimes it gets piped out into other areas. So I definitely have taken notes on that, and we'll do a little additional research to make sure anything that we're proposing isn't going to be in conflict with your weather patterns. So thanks for those thoughts.
Good, thanks.
Yeah,
Colin, anything to add there?
I didn't have anything to add, just except that, the scope of this project is somewhat narrow. This particular component of the project, we're just going to be looking at some very specific things. And so something like that might be looked at as part of a future effort.
I might just add one comment. Looking at one of the original slides that Jen presented, we talked about why the scope of sustainability was a little bit limited in this project. And one of those reasons is because we're concurrently doing the sensitive lands protection planning process, which does attempt to address the wetland piece a little bit more directly. And I know there's other people on the call who are more familiar with that project, perhaps even Christopher. Ally is on the call and she's directly familiar with it, and as is Chris.
Thanks, Natalie. So Kathy, why don't you go ahead and come off mute, and then Amaya has a question in the chat that we'll go to after, and then Lorene.
Okay, I was hearing the desire to for sustainability, enhance compact and sustainability development. And I think that's really important when you're looking at sprawl and trying to have more compact neighborhoods. But I think that in the UDC that there's not only that quantitative data-driven part of enhancing compact and sustainable development, but there's also the qualitative part of neighborhoods.
Mhm.
And I'm not seeing the balance of that. In fact, it seems more driven towards that data side and the putting things tightly, and there is definitely value in that. But to not also include the qualitative part of that does a disservice to neighborhoods, and we become more looking like everything looks alike and has definitely a different feel than what parts of Bozeman have now. So I would like to see more qualitative language there that and measurements is a little harder on the verbiage, but just compactness it does a disservice to Bozeman and its history and its livability. In the neighborhood I live in, just this week, one neighbor has a husband that's having real difficulties, and all the other neighbors are helping do different things too. And that's the quality part of it, as well as walkability. So that's one thing I'm quite concerned about, as many other people are, that gets diminished.
Kathy, could you help us understand a little bit more what those qualitative things are that you might value in the neighborhood? Is it like open space and things like that?
Open space is one of them, not being piled on top of each other. There's certainly places in the city where that's happening, and it could be useful, but not to, this gets into zoning when they're trying to combine zoning categories, zoning R1, R2, whatever, being really careful about that so that the requirements or the uses that can be done in like an R3 aren't spread all over R1 and R2 if they change the name or put them together. That's a really qualitative thing, but it also gets to the enhancing compactability and sustainable development. So does that make it clearer to you?
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Yeah. So how that zoning comes down is in fact affects the making it more compact and more sustainable, but it also can mess it up.
Yeah, it's definitely about trying to find a balance there somewhere, right?
It is, but I'm not seeing the effort in that direction or the verbal discussion as much as I would like to hear.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Thanks, Kathy. And yeah, I would remind you to revisit the Engage Bozeman site once those pamphlets are sort of digitized and posted there. And there are a few topics that I think get at what you're talking about, sort of housing diversity and mix of uses and some of the topics around density that we'd love to get your comments on.
I had a question about bioswales. So there's a parking area that was created in our neighborhood for a sorority, And there's a bioswale there, which was cool to see that the parking lot snow would all come off of that and into the, and the design plans showed that they would put in vegetation that would be appropriate for a swale and for moisture. But what I have saw done was they just put in grass, just like lawn. So enforcement of something like that, is that, that should be part of the UDC in that they have certain requirements, but they also have, you know, private property rights too, but that swale it's not functioning, at least at the present time, unless they plan to change it. It's just grass and it's in a dip.
Yeah, so one project that the city's undertaking, also in the sort of same timeline as the UDC update, is revisiting our landscaping and irrigation standards. And that's something that the Water Conservation Division is doing in coordination with this effort. And so I think that's something that would be relevant to that effort.
It would, but you have, you know, do you go back and check?
Yeah.
They had that in their whole design plan and laid out, and yet it doesn't appear to be happening.
Yeah, the effort being undertaken now is looking at new development. So setting some standards for landscaping and irrigation and drought tolerance and reducing water use for new development. And then looking at existing development or retrofits, for the example that you're touching on, I think would be something that's taken on in a later phase. So one bite at a time. But yeah, thanks for raising that point.
Just the final thing is relating to solar. We have solar.
Kathy, I'm just gonna ask that we move on to Amaya first, since she hasn't had her question answered, and then we'll come back to you if we have time. Thank you. So I'm just gonna read the question from Amaya here in the chat. Amaya says, do you think there are opportunities
Danny.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I also accidentally typed my notes, but I can kind of abbreviate my thoughts here. So yeah, I know that there are some certain zoning restrictions that I'm sure y'all are looking at in terms of removing the barriers to urban agriculture within Bozeman city limits and maybe conditionally permitting it across like more residential and mixed use zones. So that is something I want to just like vocalize support for, removing those zoning barriers to ag production as maybe not a principal permit, but or primary permit, but maybe something that can be incentivized. And then also looking at kind of expanding the model of how the city is currently incentivizing water smart, drought tolerant plantings, and seeing if there would be an opportunity to also incentivize edible landscaping, to do more infill urban agriculture through plantings of fruit trees, perennial fruiting shrubs, that sort of thing as well. And yeah, that is my comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Amaya. Okay, Lorene, go for it.
Hi, I want to readdress the protection of water. I know you've done an amazing job looking at the sustainability of our water, but I see a weakness in the protection of our water. And since the mitigation bank for this area, which is almost 100 miles to the west of us, has the majority of its mitigation is from Bozeman. And if you need facts and research on that, I can send that to you. So with that said, if that's going to continue to drain our wetlands and our water here in the city limits of Bozeman, and what avenue, it was our understanding that the UDC codes would cover that, which it has done, like in Portland, like in North Carolinas, in the South Carolinas, Virginia, Massachusetts, I think, has actually installed UDCs where you destroy 1 acre of wetland, you have to mitigate for 3 acres of wetland to compensate for all the other wetlands that have been lost over the years. Similar to Bozeman, we've lost a large amount of wetlands here. And where are we going to put those in the UDC to try to get some of those back, or to just protect what we have right now so they aren't sent to other watersheds? And with that said, I know that you said you had a narrow scope here for that, and that it was with the sensitive lands report. And where does the sensitive lands report work to protect these, or to put into UDCs to protect that, like other areas in the United States protect their wetlands? I'm sure of where the sensitive lands report or plan is coming from. I know that we did this back in 1998 with the county, and that was never approved. It was just used as a resource document. Is that what the critical land or the sensitive lands plan is for this report or plan, or is it going to be implemented into the UDCs?
Danny, I can answer that. Hi, Chris Saunders with the Community Development Office. The study you referred to back from '97 actually became a prime driver in the city adopting wetland and watercourse protection standards in 2002. So we have regulations on the books. No one claims they're perfect, but they are there and they are vigorously enforced. We do not, to the best of my knowledge, have the ability to tell the Army Corps that they cannot issue a permit. So there is work to be done there in coordination with the Army Corps. The Sensitive Lands Plan is a collaborative project across jurisdiction and with the nonprofit community as well, looking at something much larger than just Bozeman. The UDC only applies within the Bozeman city limits. So we are expecting that there can be regulatory change, which comes out of that application of the study. Hopefully it will be regulation which spans multiple jurisdictions, so it affects what's happening in Gallatin County as well as anything that happens in the city of Bozeman. But that will ultimately depend on the city, or excuse me, the county commission and what they choose to pursue with their authority.
Thanks, Chris. So I think we have one more question in the chat here, or a comment from Joyce. Joyce says, it was a pleasure to sit in on this meeting. I'm visiting for a month from Evanston, Illinois, and want to offer this observation. I own a condo in a building built in 2000, and we now have learned how expensive it will be to make our garage ready for EVs. Thus, the idea of early planning makes a lot of sense to me. I wish we in our condo could now be benefiting from such foresight, but alas, we're facing a large expense. So kudos to that, that stat on saving money by planning ahead. Thank you, Joy. Okay. Just scanning the chat box here. Amaya says need to rezone to remove boundaries to urban agriculture and offer incentives for infill food production along the lines of her earlier comment. And then Marcia added here too, ironically, the swales in our subdivision are considered non-functional if native vegetation grows in them. I'm not sure that's actually correct and would like to see that checked in the UDC. So yeah, I don't know if that is a question that we can pull an answer out of this group here. But it sounds like that might be something that comes up in the landscaping and irrigation standards as well. Okay, Kathy, coming back to you, did you have another follow-up question? And then I see Christopher and Lorene have their hands raised as well.
I was just getting ready to type it. The protection of solar site situations so that if a building goes up, it doesn't block you, block your solar access or ability to utilize solar for both electricity for your home as well as potential EV. So I know that's Natalie is aware that that's complicated, but is that being looked at?
Thanks, Kathy. I think you're aware how complicated the solar easements are. And within the state of Montana, it's generally just comes down to a handshake agreement with your neighbor. I don't know that we have the authority to do that, and I'm sure that there would be some reservations about attempting to pursue that. And I'm pretty sure that Chris has some thoughts on this one too.
Ditto. It is a complex issue that touches on a lot of different pieces. We have had some discussion about how and when is best to look at those kinds of issues. In higher density districts where you're expecting taller buildings, there's some very different sets of issues than if it's in a area that has shorter buildings, just kind of by default. So I can't say we are going to exactly do X because we don't know yet.
All right, so in just the 3 minutes we have left, I'm going to call out Dan's question here in the chat, and then Christopher will go to you, and then we'll call it an evening. So Dan says, cash in lieu of parkland or open space and cash in lieu of water appear to be unsustainable. Can those be eliminated from the UDC?
The short answer on the first part on cash in lieu of parkland, that's something that the state requires us to allow as part of the Subdivision and Platting Act. There are some latitude the city has, and that is an issue that is being explored with the Parks, Recreation, and Active Transportation Plan. So we will be looking to see some direction from the commission as they consider that document here beginning of next year. As far as cash in lieu of water, that is a very complicated issue, and it could be. Yes, we could strike that. There would be some pretty significant consequences to that as far as our ability to approve development. But that would be something that our engineering division oversees in managing and continuing to seek acquisition of water for the city. So we have not at this point had a conversation about striking it.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, Christopher, go ahead and come off mute and yep.
Okay. Yeah, I'm encouraged about a lot of things that you're discussing. I'm thrilled to see that you're looking at ahead of time or as construction is going on with the EV capability and relaxing, heights for rooftop gardens and hot houses. I think that's great for the region. One of the things that I've seen that I think could be done immediately just with the right implementation is, again, getting back to wetlands or wetland infiltration. There's a lot of the ponds that I guess maybe we as the public may see in their cattails, their rushes, their what have you, and that wildlife is choosing to nest in it. It's what's left of what used to be, maybe a wet area in a field, or it's the water catchment. But there's an issue, I think, in that sometimes those are viewed, or a lot of times viewed, as water infiltration rather than retention or habitat, yet the birds are trying to use them. So the only place that they've got left is like sandhill cranes nesting in one of those. And we've had people call us with Audubon about, going in and digging out the cattails and just digging up a sandhill crane nest, or, eliminating the bird life. So, it's something that could be done if timed correctly, something like that. If it was required, that type of activity go on in the fall, then you would not be impacting nesting birds during the breeding season. So that's something I would love to see if it could be put in anywhere, looking at the seasonality of wildlife reproduction and trying to protect that. Thanks.
Thanks, Christopher. Yeah, and we're looking for your input too as we ramp up engagement for the sensitive lands plan. So thanks everyone so much for your input. And Emily, I see that you've written your comments here in the chat too. Thank you. And we are looking forward to hearing from you again soon on the Engage Bozeman platform and upcoming City Commission work sessions and future Code Connects. So feel free to reach out to us. You have my contact info. I can put that in the chat, and then I'll also link to the Engage Bozeman webpage. But thanks to our project team and thanks for being with us.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.